In
Busy
a
in
good
a good
way.
way?
Yes, in a good way. A
Oh, that's
lot of
good.
projects, a lot of auditions, and I graduated, so I'm like, yay.
Oh, hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
What'd you graduate with?
So it's a completely different type of program. It's not standard college. It is through Norwegian, and it's a to be kind of one of their travel partners.
Oh, nice.
So I am now a certified travel partner with Norwegian Cruise Lines and can help people plan their dream vacations.
Excellent, excellent. You'll actually hear no discount from me. I am a big advocate of alternative paths to the ones that people just like normally get put into. So just because it's not college doesn't mean anything, or like a normal degree or something like that.
Mm, For me is getting my master's certificate for being a seamstress.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, yeah, we're already rolling. So if you want to
Oh, we
introduce
are.
yourself, yeah, yeah.
Well, hello. I'm LilSpook from Newgrounds, and that's pretty much all there is to say about me. Not too much exciting. I think I blipped.
It might have, but I think they heard you still.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's not much to talk about. You do a lot of IRL stuff, more than necessarily internet stuff, which is one of the things I'm more excited to talk about in general because you are an actor, more so than most people who do voice acting on the internet. Though that shouldn't be the case because acting is the most important part of voice acting. But you have like a lot of like stage or acting experience, to say the
Yes.
least. Yeah. If we
Yeah,
want to
I've
start talking about
been
that, yeah,
acting for absolutely.
yeah,
I've been acting for about as long as I can remember. So, my very first job was when I was around like 2 or 3. My parents forced me to go to an audition for those dinky little Band Aid brand commercials. The one where the kids are singing with the Band Aid.
yeah, yeah.
And that was my first introduction to the acting world. Other than that, um, I took a break for a while, but then started getting into theater. A lot of musical theater instead of traditional Shakespearean because I love singing. And in my teenage years, worked for Disney Magic Music Days as the voice of Ariel, which was an experience to say the least that really did help kind of set a fire under my butt for voice acting. But I never really made that transition until 2 years ago with the pandemic. Has it been 3 years now? I don't even remember. I've lost
Yeah,
track of time.
2019, I think, at the very
Oh,
end of the year is
goodness.
when it started. So mostly 2020, 2021, and 2022. So we're rolling almost halfway through the third year.
Oh my goodness. It's been so long. I didn't realize. But that was actually a transition moment for a lot of actors in the industry. And there's so many that still are trying to make the transition but don't know how
Yeah.
because a lot of live acting jobs dried up. No one could meet in person, no one could be on stage together, hug each other, and it was just a really emotional emotional and kind of trying time, kind of trying to figure out how to still be an actor while not being allowed out of the house.
Yeah, and you start seeing like all these. I've seen it for big stuff, but also small stuff too. A lot of people are trying to do like Zoom call shows, which is horrible because even like this interview right here, there's a slight delay since we're doing it over Discord. And imagine doing that with like 20 people who would normally be on stage in and out having to like get their cues right and everything.
It really was an experience. I actually tried to do one of those shows last year in the summer.
Oh,
It
you did.
was
Ooh.
Dear Evan Hansen, and they wanted to do it over Discord and record it, and I was like, "I don't think this is a good idea." Guys, "No, this is great. This is a fantastic idea," and ooh, it went about as well as you'd expect it to.
Yeah, yeah. Because like Discord's fine for recording things if it's like a one-on-one thing like this, because there might be a little bit of overlap. But if there's only two voices, it's fine. The audience can still make out what's going on. You start dealing with five people in a scene who are all having to make sure that they're playing off of each other. You kind of almost have to give room for gaps, which will destroy the flow of things. But it's better if there's like half a second of air between people talking than overlapped and missing where the cue is.
Absolutely. I think the funniest part with those was trying to get the singing right because those
Mm,
musical numbers, they did not overlap well, and it was
can't drop a
just
beat.
no, very interesting.
Yeah, because then you have to think like, oh, what are you gonna do? Is everybody gonna have like a silenced version of the music on their end, and you all have to try to like count down to time it right? Because even if you're like, I can play music through my mic if I wanted to, but you're gonna hear it on the same delay that you would hear my voice, so I would hear it properly. But then if you were to try to sing off of it, you might be like half a second behind, and
Mhm.
it
Yep.
just sounds like a nightmare.
It was. We had a sound person behind the stage that was playing, like, all the music and streaming all the music, while we would be kind of, like, headset on and kind of trying to pull our cue and sing along with the music, but it was, as you said, overlapped in certain parts. Not
Yeah.
only that, some people were a few seconds off. The people with a little bit worse internet were off by, like, at least 10 seconds, so it was
Yeah.
just a mishmash of nonsense.
Because from the tech side, I could definitely, if everybody had like the best internet, like a high grade fiber,
Mhm.
I could see like having a tech director doing sound and all that stuff right there on OBS if you were like recording or streaming that way, because you could offset the sound by a second. So it's like you guys would hear it first through the Discord, but the recorded version would actually be a second off, and that would be fine. But then we also have to count that everybody doesn't have the best internet. So yeah, that no,
Mhm.
there's just no way to solve that situation.
No. But luckily, theater has started to come back live now, which is so fantastic. I've seen friends that I haven't seen in years smiling back on stage. Everyone's hugging each other. It's just kind of like one big family coming back together. We all actually just went out to audition for the same thing a few days ago. So fingers are crossed.
Oh, just a regular acting troupe. That's nice.
Hmm. There's a lot of them down here, and I'm just so happy that we're finally able to get back to stage acting. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop trying to take baby steps into voice acting, but I'm absolutely relieved.
Well, I mean, you should definitely keep doing the voice acting. One of the things that shows from having live acting experience or just acting experience in general is unlike a lot of people who just jump into it, you can really feel the expression coming through. I obviously can't see you doing the recording, but I would imagine you're probably doing like hand movements and stuff as if you were on stage while you're sitting there recording. So you can hear you getting into it. And I think it would be a loss to definitely the community if you weren't continuing doing voice acting just because you were able to go back up on stage.
Absolutely, and the one thing I can wholeheartedly admit, and some people might not agree with me, Yes, stage acting is complicated. You have to do it live. You have to remember all of your lines, and you only get that one chance when you're right out there in front of the audience. But and yes, with voice acting, you can take as many takes as you'd like. I still find it more difficult to do voice acting, and it's kind of for the same reason that you stated. You're in a booth.
Yeah.
You are alone. You only have your voice to get through to people and make them feel something. It's not like on stage where you have your facial expression. You can force yourself to cry on command. You can show with your body how you're feeling. And you have other people that you can bounce off of and feed off of their energy to make it more
Yeah.
realistic.
Because it makes
And
like
in a
there's like an emotion
booth,
to the room with everybody acting off of each other.
exactly.
Yeah. And the audience
And
too.
yeah, you when the audience gives you that feedback too, it really does help amplify those emotions and make it more realistic to play. But it's just me and my mic in here, and
Yeah.
you have to find that right balance between like giving it enough emotion but not overacting.
Hmm. Yeah. It's really hard to tell. It's definitely better when you at least have like a director while doing the voice acting, which is something I think people on Newgrounds specifically, if they're really trying to up their game when it comes to their scripts and stuff and their voice actors, is that since we have things like Discord, the voice actor should still definitely record things on their end, so you don't get like this clipping and stuff like that. But it would be nice if like the actual creator, the writer, director of the show would be in the call with the voice actor to give them feedback instead of just like here's your 5 or 6 lines, give me 3 takes of each and I'll just pick the best one.
And that's something I found that Newgrounds does a lot. I've been to a
Mm-hmm.
few websites, backstage.com, castingcall.club, but Newgrounds, really all of the directors I've dealt with, at least 70% of them are like, "Hey, here's my Discord. Let's hop in a call. We'll go over
Oh,
lines
that's good.
together."
I haven't had that experience yet, but that's
Oh,
good.
not yet?
Yeah,
Well,
no,
I'm gonna let you know they're out there.
no. Some people have been up in their game. That's good. If you guys are listening to this, you guys are doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Keep up the good work. Keep striving to be better.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely better when you have somebody to play off, especially a director, because I think anybody who hasn't done any form of acting probably doesn't understand how important of a role a director plays in literally
Mhm.
anything. Because they're the person who has to keep that like outside view of everything going on, that objective perspective to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And that's another thing I've seen a few times, not as much with Newgrounds, but there are some voice actors who are just starting out, just getting their feet wet, that have stated something along the lines of they don't feel that directors are necessary, which I don't feel to be true at all. They say that they're just the idea givers and the people who are there to oversee, which any of you listening, 100% not true. You need someone there to coach you, to kind of reel everything together so you're not throwing way too much emotion out there, and so you kind of stay humble a bit.
Yeah, because you need an observer perspective. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? Especially when like you get into the motion. Even if you're like the best actor, you might be playing it up too hard because you're just too into it. And you're like, whoa, 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 reel that back a bit. That's more energy than the scene actually needs.
Yep, 100% agree.
Yeah. For me, man, I wish more of the stuff I've recorded would get out. I have this weird history when it comes to making things where I will do a lot of pro bono stuff for people and then it just never happens. Back in high school, I used to make sprites for stuff, like for games that people wanted to make on the internet. Most of them never came out. I record a lot of voice
Oh
lines for people.
no.
Most of it never comes out. It's like, whatever. But like for me, transitioning to voice acting was pretty easy, I guess, because some of my theatrical experience came with puppetry, right? So
Puppetry.
you still have other people to play off of, right? When you're behind the curtain doing puppets, but you at least already have that disconnection from the audience, really, to some degree. Like you can hear laughter or certain expressions, but it's really hard again because there's like a curtain between you and you hear the people right next to you the most, so you couldn't see their face like you can standing up on stage or doing stand-up comedy or any other form of like theatrical art where you can see the expressions of the audience at any time. Though I know depending on the stage, you might not anyway because the lights are too bright.
Oh, the lights are always too bright.
And they're
But I
hot.
suppose that's a good thing, especially with a lot of the makeup and costuming that
Yeah.
you have to wear sometimes. It is unbearably hot.
I don't think people realize it's like if you go to a Ren festival in
Oh, yeah.
Louisiana in the middle of the summer in full garb, you're close to how hot it is on stage, but probably still not there yet.
I don't know. Well, it's the same for Renaissance festivals in Florida, just
Yeah, yeah.
sweltering. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we have the same problem here because not quite as much because it doesn't get as humid in Texas as it does in Florida. But for some reason, all of our Ren season is late spring through the summer, probably just because that's when most people have time to do it. And during that
Yeah.
time, it's like anywhere between 50% to like 80% humidity on any given day. So it's still probably 20% less than it is in Florida. And it's just awful. But it probably lets you know how people dressed like that in the actual day felt because they were dressed like that every single day of the year.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I've worked plenty of rent fairs and I do not envy them. I don't
Yeah.
know what they were thinking back in the day, but there's no reason, especially with some of these gowns that you see that are like, what's the best way to describe them? Wearing a rug with
Yeah.
fleece lining. There's no reason for it. And we
Yeah,
do
well,
ours. Our season is in the middle of what we would call down here winter, like
yeah.
between December and February, which it's still so hot.
Yeah, yeah. It would be like I think weather-wise it's equivalent to how it is in autumn here. And that's like the coolest it ever gets over there in Florida.
Save for the occasional like 30-degree day,
Yeah.
which we are all falling like iguanas out of trees, dying because it's so cold.
Well, so one, I don't think fleece specifically was something that was worn year round. I think that's one of the issues with Ren fairs is that you kind of have to pick things that are out of season because you're
hmm
just trying to give the general feel of the time period. Um, but they would wear like full gowns and stuff year round. And one of the things you have to remember, they barely had deodorant. And that was mostly just flower petals that they could
Oh,
put into their
yeah.
armpits and stuff. So it was better to just clothe up to cut the smell. And also, they didn't have sunscreen. So you kind of wanted to cover as much skin as possible if you were going to be outside.
Absolutely. 100 especially that explains their hats. I have
Hmm.
so many of those hellishly ugly hats in my closet for whenever my directors call me. It's like, "Okay, you're playing Princess Mary. Okay, you're playing what is her name that I'm gonna be next year? Latisse? Latisse Knowles? I believe that's her name. But my God, they're so have you seen these things?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen them. I know what you're
One of
talking
them
about.
looks like a gingerbread house with, like, a veil on it.
Yeah. So if you were richer though, and this is also why, like you see in certain periods, the wealthier people would show more skin. Maybe they would have like a lower cut trim or something. The powdering could somewhat act as a pseudo sunscreen, especially because richer people wouldn't be outside as much, right? So they've had the proper makeup and stuff, and that adds like a slight layer between you and the sun. But if you're
Mhm.
poor, yeah, no, you just had to cover up. That was the only option, especially if you're going to be out like working the field or anything like that. So why people wonder why cowboys wore long sleeve shirts and like leather vests and stuff in the middle of like the summer in Texas. And it's like, well, if all you had was a white long sleeve shirt, and preferably white because it would reflect a lot of the heat and light. But if all you had is a white long sleeve shirt between you and the sun, you would take it as opposed to being sleeveless.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That and most of the clothing was linen back then, so that
Yeah.
gave a little bit of an air of breathability.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I love linen cloth. Like it's great. I don't know why we stopped. I guess because polyester is just cheaper, but
Oh, I know, but it's just the worst thing that has ever been invented.
oh, especially for costumes.
It
I
really
hate it.
is.
I did a photo shoot with a group of people for fantasy stock photos, right? We have there's like a DeviantArt setup that just has a bunch of like stock photos people can use. I'm in there. And I have like this kind of like charcoal grayish black blouse like shirt that I was wearing. And it was somewhat cotton, but it was like a blend. It was polyester. And after a while of being in the heat, sitting there modeling and in poses and stuff, it just got really itchy and hot and uncomfortable. Like if this was a full cotton or full like linen shirt, this would have been a much better experience.
I can't even imagine.
Mm.
That sounds like torture.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably not too different than being on stage in a polyester costume that's trying to mimic time period appropriate costume.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It's like you're one of those hot dogs on the rotisserie in a 7-Eleven under a heat lamp.
Yeah,
It's the
but it's
closest
fun.
feeling I can imagine.
I've done very few uh, non puppetry theatrical things, but definitely I can agree with what you were saying before. There's like a certain thrill to the performance because performance art is kind of its own beast in itself, and there's something about like again cues, timing, especially if there's like a costume change between scenes and stuff, and you have to like make sure you get in and out fast. Maybe somebody has to redo your makeup. There's like this you're like a cog in a machine if you're doing it right.
Yes, and that is my favorite thing. I love it when it's the most hectic. The best example I have is I worked Disney Newsies, and I was 3 different roles.
Oh.
And I was Hannah, which was Mr. Pulitzer's assistant. I was Bowery Beauty, which is one of the little dancing showgirls. And then I was just some random extra side character that would walk through and buy a paper.
Mm.
However, the worst part about it, but also the best, was all of these scenes took place back to back to back. So it was a constant costume change. I would walk on scene, do my line, sprint backstage. I had like 3 people waiting for me. I had 4 costumes underneath, like layered on top of each other, that I would just like pull off and then run back on stage to be ready in 30 seconds.
No, that sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun, and people are always like, "Oh, it's so stressful. Why would you want a quick change? Why would you do that to yourself?" There's nothing more exhilarating than the feeling of, "Oh god, am I gonna make it on time? Am I gonna be in place? Am I gonna be in the right I mean, am I remember my props? Who knows?"
Yeah. Well, so I think also because people don't realize there's two different types of stress, right?
Mhm.
So some people who aren't used to it, they just think all stress is the same. But there's like anxiety, which is stress you don't choose to put yourself into, and that can have some problems to it. But then there's like it's hard to put a word for it. But there's the stress you choose, which is more like taking on a challenge, and there's something
Exactly.
exhilarating about taking on a challenge.
I completely agree with that. That's the best way I've ever heard it put.
Yeah. I don't know. Everybody needs to take on challenges. And I think the stage for actors is where to do it. Because it's not, it can be challenging to do voice acting, you know, not going to cut any slack, but you can take all the time you want, right? If you're not getting it down, you're only hurting your own schedule by doing multiple retakes, which you would prefer not to do, especially if you're getting paid, because that's more hours you
Absolutely.
could be getting more work done. But it's still, you're only hurting yourself. If you're up on stage, though, you're hurting everybody else if you don't do what you do right, and that's where that challenge comes in.
And the other part of that challenge with the stage is if you do mess up, the saying "the show must go on" really does apply. It doesn't matter if you messed up. If
Yeah.
you are walking on stage without we had 2 instances during that show. One of the kids was about to do a tap number. He couldn't find his shoes. So he had, like, 2 seconds, and then you just see this look come over his face. He's like, "Okay, cool." And he walks out on stage without his shoes on and makes a joke. It's like, "Hey, you like my shoes?" It's like I was like, "I was running around town so much that I lost my shoes looking for you," and the crowd loved it. Just
Yeah.
if you don't rise to that challenge, improv it and make it better.
Yeah, improv is a very necessary skill in almost anything, but especially theater. Because like, if you have a good troupe, which I'm sure you do, when you talk about like it's like a family reunion, that's how most acting was for most of history. Is like you would have the same people performing locally with each other all the time, and
Oh,
if
yeah.
one of them was out of a job, they were all out of a job. They were usually looking for it together. So if you have a troupe that knows each other and knows how to play off of each other, if even one person makes a mistake, then somebody else will even try to cover up for it because they all know how to play off of each other.
Yep, pick up slack, and you never really know how small that acting pool is until you start doing live acting. You'll even if you move from theater company to theater company, going to every single audition, you're gonna see a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah. And I think it's because there are more opportunities now
Oh, yeah.
in general, but less people are needed for each opportunity than it used
Mhm.
to be. So you still have like the same pool or like the same proportionate pool of people that you would have in the past when it was like there's a single theater in town. It's just now it's like, well, we only actually need five of you for what we're doing. The other 15 can go home. You're like, ah,
Yeah.
dang it.
Yep, and it is the worst. But another thing with that too is if you're looking to get into acting or even voice acting, you got to make connections.
Oh
The
yeah.
more connections you have and the closer you are with people, like if I was out of work, this is how I found out about the auditions I just did on Friday is someone will send you a link and be like, "Hey, I saw this role and I thought of you." Or, "Hey, I saw this voice type for this casting call and I think you should audition." You really gotta stay close, be active in the community, and everyone takes care of each other.
Yeah. What you gotta basically that term living rent free in somebody's head. You really can't live rent free in somebody's head. Not really. You have to be doing something to pay your rent, and a lot of times that is just like interacting with people a lot. And as long as you're paying your rent, people will start. Everybody's kind of have like even if a weak working model, they've got a working model of everybody they know in their head. And if your model in somebody's head is a strong one, and they can place it over a role, you'll be the first one they think of.
Absolutely. That's very, very true.
It's like that in any work too. It's like freelancing, right? Which acting, unless you're in like a very fixed troupe, and usually those are only at the higher levels. Like Disney's
Oh,
got certain
equity.
sets of actors and stuff. At the lower level, it's pretty much all just freelancing, and you're doing
Mhm.
all the same stuff. Like if I want a job, I need to make sure I'm constantly networking, and there needs to be a model of, oh well, Metal can do this, so he's the first person I'm going to think of for that. It's all the same stuff.
Oh, yeah. And it's not something that you can do if you don't love it. If you're
Yeah.
just doing it because you wanna get popular quick or you're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a really good actor. I think I'd be able to nail this," it's not for you. Because there's a saying, it's 50 no's to 1 yes. For every 50 auditions you do, you're only gonna get one yes.
And sometimes that's a generous take.
That's a very generous take sometimes, especially if you haven't been keeping up on your studying. Like if you haven't been doing acting techniques, if you haven't been trying to expand your repertoire, you're not gonna really no one's gonna look at you as much because everyone else around you is always trying to hustle and bustle and get to the top.
Yeah. Well, so the way I look at it, right, is I think the word the best person for the role is only from the perspective of the director, right?
Mhm.
Or casting director, if there's a separate one. From the acting perspective, you can't ever think like I'm the best person for the role because realistically, a role needs to be filled. So your goal is to be the better person for the role because there are plenty of other people that are trying to get it too.
Oh, yes. Especially now with everything opening back up, everyone's trying to get back into it and jump on the train to the all the auditions and get back on stage because
Yeah.
my god, we've missed it.
And sometimes it's literally getting on the train. I know you were talking about this. Might have been the live show you were on recently with that Johnny guy, but it's not always just local. Right? What you have to define as local might be really
Ugh,
far. When you're acting, you might even have to travel like a state or two over sometimes just to get a role.
that's hurtfully true.
Yeah,
Um, my I'm based in South Florida, so I'm about 4 hours away from Orlando,
yeah,
and that's where 90% of my work is. Then there's Brevard, which is about 3, and then there's Sarasota, which is 5, but my local consists from Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and Louisiana. And if anything was ever calling my name from New York to go and do it, I'd go there in a heartbeat. It's kind of you have to be open to traveling because not everything is going to be in your area.
you know what? That's the real actor's life, even historically, because a lot of troops used to travel. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
you couldn't just stay in London. Sometimes there's a show going on in Paris or Cologne or something. You're like, okay, we'll hop on the ferry. Guess that's where we're going today. We'll be there in
Yep,
a
and it's
month.
the same with film too.
Hmm.
Another thing with film, it's not too dissimilar from theater, except you're never supposed to look at the camera. My God, ever. But
Not unless
mm,
the director specifically tells you to, and there's very, very few
exactly.
cases.
Very few cases. Unless you're in a sitcom like The Office, it's not
Yeah.
going to happen often.
Or if like maybe the camera's supposed to be a character's point of view, so you're looking them dead in the eye. Like there are serious cases for it, but
Mhm.
they hardly ever come up.
Absolutely. Most film right now is taking place in San Diego, Texas, and right outside of New York, New York. So if
Yeah.
you wanted to get into the film industry, you got to go there. Unless you like indie films and B-rated, then Florida is your place. There are so many indie horrors coming out right now. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I know my area, DFW specifically, has always been a really good area for film and TV. There's a lot of stuff always being shot here. People would always think Austin is the place to go for arts of different sorts. It's like, no, but Austin's not really theater. Austin's got like music, and
Mhm.
that's what they do. But the Dallas area has a lot of actual like theaters, and they've
Oh,
got a lot of
yes.
film studios over here too, where they
Dallas and
shoot
Fort
TV shows and
Worth.
stuff. Yeah, which is basically one area. That's why we call it DFW over here. They're
Oh,
like
the
their
more you
own
know.
set of twin cities. There's like one or two cities in between, very small, and you just drive straight across. The whole area is almost like a state of its own. If you count the what they call the metroplex, which is the surrounding counties, it's about the size of Connecticut.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, it's one of the areas to be. Definitely always have opportunities over here. especially if you're again looking for freelance. I know some of the acting stuff I've done has been off of Craigslist, and oddly enough, people are really good at paying when you do acting
Craigslist,
gigs on
really?
Craigslist. Yeah, you're just browsing through it, and somebody's like, "I need 3 people who don't mind getting a little physical for choreographing a fight scene for like a YouTube video that probably will never get edited and put up, but you get paid like $60 for showing up." It's like, okay, I'll do it.
That's absolutely insane. I would have never thought of Craigslist to be a place for auditions. The only time I checked that was the very beginning of my career, and it was, please mind me when I say this, it was just all pornos.
Oh yeah.
Every single one of them was a porno.
Yeah, well, so it's 2 things. One, it's not the best place to look, right? But I mean, if you're starting a career, you can look.
Oh, yeah.
It's better when you're in an area that's active for that type of craft. And again, DFW is very active for filming. But you are weeding through a lot of stuff when you're doing that. So it's like, it's your desperation area.
Absolutely. I know a few of my friends that I know from the wrestling world used to check on Craigslist for certain wrestling gigs, but good to know. I'm gonna have to check out Craigslist after we're done here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm usually on it anyway because it's where I do a lot of different freelancing. So it's where I find a lot of gigs, and occasionally I'll see like an acting thing. It's like, oh, that might be fun. Speaking of
Oh,
wrestling,
mhm.
I heard you talking about it. It's a shame the reason why you couldn't get into it. Um, but wrestling, I think, is an underrated form of theatrical performance because it's all
It
it is
really
theater.
is. It is, and the one thing that drives me insane is when people say, "You know it's all scripted, it's fake.
A lot of it's
Wrestling is
improv.
fake." A lot of it's mostly all improv.
Yeah.
They have you backstage and they tell you, "Okay, this is the match. It needs to be this long, usually between like 2 to 5 minutes. This is the person who's winning, and I need you to do this one move at least once."
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Okay, we're gonna figure it out." But not only that, all of those stunts are real.
Yeah.
They're stunt actors, and they can hurt themselves so bad.
Well, I used to have a really big beef of it when I was younger. And that's because I came from like a martial arts background and I'm looking at it. And my beef was more with the fans than the actual wrestling because I like a lot of the characters and the actors and they are doing crazy stunts. But there's a lot of people who would think like it was real fighting. And if you want to call anything fake, it is fake fighting. Most of what they do would not be practical in an actual fight. But if we do look at it purely from the performance and the athletic side of it, is very impressive what a lot of the people are doing on a very regular basis.
Absolutely, and I myself, because it's just a bunch of stunt work, and all of those moves have to be so precise, even when they're improving it in the middle of the ring. They have to be so careful and 100% on point with those moves because even the smallest margin of error, like if you're off by a centimeter with how you're grabbing someone, or in my case, someone was trying to give me a hip toss
Yeah.
and their leg was placed wrong. And when I went to go jump, they popped my knee backwards, like
Oof.
all the way, full hyperextension the opposite way. I had to be carried off ring. Now, if you want to go, I highly recommend like finding and doing your research on a good wrestling school. I had one of the best trainers. I love him to death. I'm sorry about how everything went, how I can't do it, but you really just got to do a lot of research. Don't let them tell you, "Okay, you finished your roles. You did roles for a week. That's all you need to learn." do your roles, which I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense, but
No, no, no.
anyone in
Yeah.
oh,
I understand what you mean. Um, so actually, this made me think of something, and you might agree with me. I don't know, but wrestling brought this up. There's a double-edged sword when it comes to live performance that is the filming of live performance, where it's kind of like simultaneously elevated it, but also kind of destroys the performance at the same time, especially because more
mhm.
people watch the remote version, recorded or live, than they actually do the live performance. And a lot gets lost when you are looking at it through the lens of a high definition camera that can zoom in on stuff that probably shouldn't be zoomed in on, as opposed to
Oh,
being in the
absolutely.
audience of a
I
theatrical performance.
completely agree on that. So much can be lost, and if you're watching it through a screen, if you look at it from, like, a different angle, it might come off like I don't know how to word what I'm trying to say. Different angles can completely skew what's trying to be portrayed.
It could destroy the illusion, right? Because
Absolutely.
all acting is, most art in general, I like to refer to magic tricks or illusions. When you're working with canvas art, it's a lot easier to pull it off because people only ever see the final product. So they don't know like what you did in between. You're just like, here's the finished piece. You don't even see like my sketch lines underneath it or whatever. But with performance art, especially theater, with a stage, center stage, because you can do box theaters. I've been in box theaters, but like an actual proper
Mhm.
stadium seated stage, uh, you can set up your backdrop and everything where there's certain overlaps of things that are flat otherwise to give you the illusion that there is scenery. That could be easy to move around. That if you start looking at that from different angles, it's almost like playing Super Paper Mario, and he suddenly turns 3D and everything's flat, and
Yep.
you can just walk past things.
Yep. And if they angle it a certain way, you can see past one of the curtains and you might see somebody standing in the background waiting for
Yeah,
their cue. So, yeah, I fully agree with you on that. Certain yes, it's good in the sense that it's reaching more people and more people are allowed to see the content. However, if you have the wrong person behind the camera that doesn't really know I wouldn't say know what they're doing, but are approaching it from a non-theatrical perspective, then that's where I see it comes a bit of an issue because it really does shatter that illusion, and it really makes it hard to convey certain things. So easy to miss small details.
yeah. And it's not like you can have your tech director back behind the camera too, because half the time they're not trained for a camera. That's not one of the pieces of
No.
equipment that they are overseeing. But also, they're so busy making sure that like lights are on cue, sounds on cue, and other things like that, that they wouldn't be able to do like yet another job of, hey, make sure you're at this angle at this time, and so you have
Oh,
like a
yeah.
separate
I
crew
don't
just for
envy them.
cameras. Yeah.
Mhm. Nope, I completely agree. Tech directors are a force to be reckoned with. I don't know how they handle all the lights, all the like, if you have a fog machine, if you have certain sounds that are supposed to play directly on cue. They are amazing. Same with backstage directors.
Yeah. Back at my high school, when I was in theater tech, our tech director, I think the only reason she pulled everything off, she even had to wrangle the actual director a lot. He
Oh,
turned out to
no.
be a horrible person, but we're pretty sure that the only reason that she was so good at what she did, wrangling people and getting things done, this kind of like 5 foot nothing, built like a brick house woman, was because she was previously a hitman. We have no
Oh
real
my
evidence to
god.
it, but we all had the suspicion that she was previously a hitman.
W What gave you that suspicion?
Well, one, she liked to play a game called Hitman, and almost nobody could ever get like the marker on her. You know, like where you have like the dry erase markers, and you get a slash
Oh,
on
I love
somebody if
it.
you actually give them. She was really suspiciously good at it too. It was hard to ever sneak up on her and stuff, and there was just many things, just the way she was able to wrangle people, and it was a sneaking suspicion that almost everybody developed at some point in time.
That is one of the best things I've ever heard. Horrifying, but that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's a scary job, and most of the time it is I wouldn't say scary, but they're people with reverence. Like you kind of revere the people in those positions.
Oh, yeah. They have to have some sort of authoritative power where you look at them and you're like, "Ooh, that's not someone that I wanna mess with."
Yeah,
That's really the best people for the role of director.
yeah, for sure. Can't be somebody who's like flimsy or loose or a pushover. It's got to be somebody who's telling you exactly what you're doing.
Absolutely. Someone that's not afraid to very mildly hurt your feelings if you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the biggest thing about acting in general that I think people need to understand. You have to be a tough nut if you're gonna do any form of acting, even if it's just like online voice acting, because you have to be prepared to, I would say, have your feelings hurt, but to not have your feelings hurt, right? Like you can't really
Mhm.
take anything too personally. You have to take the criticism like, okay, I'll adjust.
Yes, unless they're a dick.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
what
would
I
just leave the
mean by
project then.
that, oh, yeah, it was when I was working with Disney, the Ariel thing. They, for kind of like a thank you, they brought us backstage to the recording studios where like all the recording for the movies are done. And I was honored and I got to meet the vocal director that stands in the booth with you for The Little Mermaid. And they were like, "Okay, we're going to re-record over The Little Mermaid with your voice. And it's not going to be released, but it's just kind of a fun experience for you." And I'm like, "Oh, yay, this sounds great." Tiny little me, feet just wet. And I'm sitting there and we're doing Part of Your World. Oh, my
Which
soul
is
still hurts thinking
also like
about this.
technically the most difficult song in that movie to sing too.
It, oh, my soul hurts thinking about this. And so it's the stupid, "I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty. I've got who's its and what's its galore. You want thingamabobs? I've got 20." That line, the "I've got thingamabobs." They, the first time I did it, she said, "Okay, no, do it like this." "Okay." And I did it again. "Okay, I need you to be a little more energetic." "Okay." And I did it again. And she's like, no." And this went on for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I swear I did it at least 50 different times. And I was finally fed up. And I said it so sarcastically and snarky. And she was, "Perfect! That's great. That's exactly what I was looking for." And they kept it. So you gotta get used to and that feeling of, "Are you kidding me?" Because some people really just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, yeah, because it sounds like you probably did it perfect beforehand, but they were trying to give you like the actual experience of working with like the
Mhm.
Disney
Mm.
voice coach and stuff. So they were waiting until you snapped. Like that's exactly what it sounds like.
It really felt like it. And I apologize. It wasn't that line. It was like, "What do you call them? Oh, feet."
Yeah.
Mm. Oh, man. Moral of the story, don't trust the mouse. The
Oh no,
mouse is
no.
aggravating.
The House of Mouse is like it's a mafia. That's all it is.
Oh my goodness.
They'll make you an offer you probably should refuse but won't.
Absolutely. The they will that's the one thing too with them is if you get cast with them, you are automatically an equity member, which if you're an actor, voice actor, whatever the heck type of actor you want to be, that is what you want. you
Yeah.
want to be equity because that is the union. That means you have insurance, you get paid days off, and they'll help you find your next job. And once a director sees that you have equity under your belt, you'll start getting the higher paying jobs and the ones that actually like make it on screen, make it to Broadway, New York. So they
Yeah, it's the cost of
offer
job security versus frustration.
exactly. That's exactly what it is. Job security versus frustration. And it also goes with the auditioning process because to get into equity, if you're not with Disney or if you're not with one of those things, you need to go through the equity candidacy program. Gosh, that's a tongue twister. And do 40 to 50 hours of stage time, 40 to 50 weeks of stage time. I don't remember which one it is. It's one of those two. And that's how you have to be cast. And it could only be through an equity accredited theater.
Yeah, if I were to guess, I would probably say the latter. Just because it's like, well, that's you're not even going to be on stage for a whole year, so it's going to be more than that. But that's a whole year of stage time. That sounds like something they'd put you through.
Yeah, it is a grind. It
Yeah,
is a grind and a half. I've been doing it for 10 years now. I've barely made a dent.
yeah. Well, that's why most people have been going to the internet for things, if they want to get into
Oh,
that
yes.
career.
And the internet is such a beautiful place to find those opportunities.
Yeah, and so like I know early days of YouTube. It was one of the reasons why I checked Craigslist in the first place. I kept hearing people always like, "Oh yeah, I just put an ad for like I needed 5 people on Craigslist," and they showed up, and that's how I shot the thing. It's like, man, I should do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Now I don't even know how people do it. Like,
You gotta be extroverted. And if you're
yeah,
introverted, you gotta learn to put on that mask. Help you with your acting skills a little bit.
yeah. Well, I mean that's a funny thing too. Is like I noticed most actors tend to be introverts.
Oh, I
At
can
least most
say
I've
that
met.
I am.
Yeah. But I think also
Yeah.
because introverts are, when they're young too, they're the most likely to play pretend in general, even though all kids do to some degree. But they're like for longer, they'll play pretend. And also, they're more likely to coop themselves up and refine a skill over time. And acting is one of those perfect things. It's like, oh, well, I can just like refine playing pretend until like I'm an expert at playing pretend. And they'll get up
Oh,
on
yeah.
stage and they'll do that. And they look very extroverted while you're up on stage, but then you go back to the green room, you see everybody's just like reading magazines and not even talking to each other.
Oh, yeah. Well, most times. I mean, with acting for introverts, at least speaking for myself and the people that I've met along the way, it's putting on a mask, going out on stage, and being somebody that you're not.
Yeah,
Because most of it stems from, what is it called? Gosh, I forgot the name of it. Imposter syndrome.
yeah,
So if you can put on that mask and be somebody else on stage and make somebody smile, it is the best feeling.
yeah.
And
She's
then
like, well, the person
backstage
I'm playing isn't introverted.
exactly. And then backstage, sometimes the funniest things happen. It Everyone is just riding off of that energy of, "Hey, we're making something great right now." Just being supportive. If they see someone is panicking, they'll pull them to the side, help them with their quick change, tell them they're gonna do great, and then
Yeah.
push them off onto the stage.
Well, yeah, because you still have the energy from the active process going on.
Oh, yeah.
Just funny too. Like I find the people who tend to be the most extroverted in this whole like I guess cast and crew situation tend to more be the directing and writing sides of things. Those are the people who tend to be extroverted, which is good because directors, producers, and writers need to talk to people a lot that have absolutely nothing to do with the whole actual production side of things, right? Like producers need to talk to people for money. Directors need to talk to other people outside of just the cast and crew, and writers need to sell their script to people. And those where the extroversion tends to be, and the introversion tends to be on stage. Though you'll find like what's it called, exceptions to those rules, plenty
Oh
if you work
yeah.
hard enough.
Oh yeah. Like our we had an intimacy director. So that's just someone who walks on stage during certain scenes or helps you portray certain things on stage during certain scenes. Like kissing scenes, or let's say you have a sex scene during a theater
Yeah.
production. They direct you through that entire she was the most introverted, shy person I have ever met in my life, and she was a director.
Actually, that's
I
very weird. She was an intimacy director and was
Yeah,
like a shy. Like that's probably you would expect that to be the most extroverted person if you were
extroverted
to
of
think
them
about it.
all.
Yeah, because they're like you need to have experience with what it's like to be intimate with people to be able to direct people on intimacy.
Exactly. And how to do it correctly to not make it weird and to not overstep certain boundaries with what is the word I'm looking for? Boundaries with people that you're working with.
Yeah. Well, actually, that might be one of the areas where introversion's good. Introverts tend to have a very strong, like, uh, I guess, model of where boundaries should be compared to extroverts,
Mhm.
right? Because extroverts are more likely to break boundaries unintentionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. So we
Like,
are at about 57 minutes in. Gives us about like three or so more, or we could run over a little bit depending. Is there anything you want to talk about near the end, or should I just pose a question?
oh no, you leave me with the choice. That's hard. I would say I'm gonna let you ask a question. Anything you want to know?
Yes, yes, yes. What has been your favorite role that you've played in general?
Oh no. In general, including voice acting and live acting?
Yes, yes. Just well, like if you were just
Uh-oh.
let it come to your head, what role has been impactful enough that you'd think of it right away?
I'd have to say, and it's not something that anyone would be familiar with unless they are local to my area. It's a very small role, and it's actually based on like what my username is, who LilSpook is, and in general why I decided to write a story about her that no one has really seen yet. But Lady Antigone Hyde, she is a festival character that is the Lord Governor's daughter. And she's just the oldest of 3 siblings, and the rest of her family is evil, but she's really just trying to be kind, show everyone that they don't have to rule with an iron fist, and those that won't listen, she tries to clean up after them. It's a very fun character to play because she is a scare actor as well. So she flips from being this kind, sweet, loving person who just wants the best for everyone and everyone to be happy to at night, she is actually the scariest person on the scare trail because she's ravenous, doesn't care who she's attacking, and just altogether really fun to play.
Well, I mean, the last name kind of fits then, the whole Hyde thing. So yeah, that sounds fun to play. A lot of definitely. I guess you could. It would be improper to use the word bipolar because it has a specific meaning, but a
Mhm.
dipolar character where there's like extreme opposites to them can always be fun to
Yes.
flip between.
Absolutely, and that's what I do like about it is it gives me an opportunity to play both sides of the coin and really stretch what I'm able to express and do. It's a very nice challenge.
Yeah. Like I know specifically too in that regard. Most actors I've known, which I surprisingly know a lot of actors, but maybe that's not so surprising after some of the things I've said. Um, most actors I know love playing the roles that are most unlike themselves.
Yes,
And if you're playing a character that flips, there's a really good chance that at least one of those sides is going to be very, very unlike yourself.
absolutely. And when you're acting, I 100% recommend never play a character that's directly like yourself. Always try to do something different than your comfort zone, but always find something that you can relate to with that character. Just one thing so you can add a small piece of yourself into that character, and it makes it easier to portray that other one.
Yeah, that's actually why I usually recommend people play tabletop games. I think it's a really good place to experiment with acting if you're trying to get into it. Because once you
It
play a
really
character,
is.
you can just choose to jump into the role because it is a choice whether you act a character out or not. And it's like, well, if you want to be an actor, just choose to get into it. And maybe even don't play a character you make the first time or whatever. Play a prefab character that comes out of the box.
Mhm.
Learn to play the role that's given to you. And then maybe the next time you can make a character that's very unlike yourself, but it's a good place to get experience.
I agree with that. Tabletop games are a great place to explore different character types and just test things out.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of our time. Thanks for coming on. It's a fun
Thank you
conversation.
for having me.
Yeah, yeah. If people want to find you, I'll like I have with everyone. I'll invite you to the project file. You should be up on the side under vocals, and also I will probably have tagged your user in the description below, so people can should go and check out your stuff. You've done some great voice work so far, so people have stuff to listen to. But you also do art and other things, so they should just check out your profile in general.
Thank you. That's very, very kind.
Yeah, and I have absolutely no idea who we're recording next with, but we'll see everybody some other time.
Absolutely. I'm wishing you the best of luck in finding the next person on your podcast.
It'll be easy. I'll randomly shoot somebody some message and it'll work out. That's how it's mostly been going so far.